All right, the first question I'm told is not a hypothetical question. It is, in a Mystic/Relic deck, would you sooner run a Glacial Grasp, Inordinate Rage, or Spell Shield? So this is an interesting question because I talked about how the Mystic deck and the Relic deck, like Mystic and Relic, look for the same cards but push you in different directions. In that the Mystic's really aggressive and the Relic is really, like, you know, controlling. We'll say controlling. It wants a control deck. But obviously both cards are very strong, and once you're playing with one and working hard to support it, since it likes a lot of similar cards, the other card is going to be good in your deck. So it's not uncommon that you will end up with Mystic and Relic in your deck, and that's the kind of thing that can push you into kind of this, you know, all limited decks are mid-range kind of space, and blue-red does just, like, end up there fairly often. But as to the question of whether I'd sooner run Glacial Grasp, Inordinate Rage, or Spell Shield, my first pick there is definitely going to be Glacial Grasp. Anytime I have Relic in particular, but any of these spells matter things, I'm really looking for cantrips so that I can keep generating more triggers. And I mentioned that Glacial Grasp in particular is great with Relic Amulet because it buys time against the big things while your Relic Amulet's either answering little things or charging up to answer the big things. So basically, no matter what other stuff I have going on, Glacial Grasp is going to be my highest preference of those cards. And then between Inordinate Rage and Spell Shield, I think that's pretty close, but I'm going to prefer Spell Shield because of the fact that I have evasive creatures and removal as defined by the prompt of this question, which means that I'm minimally likely to get into combat. And so the, like, trick offered by Inordinate Rage, I'm more interested in the counterspell side of Spell Shield than the win combat side of Inordinate Rage. And obviously I also like the, you know, mana, like the fact that I can play Spell Shield for one in a spot where I'm potentially trying to play a lot of spells. And I also maybe have some kicker stuff going on in this deck. That's possible. Maybe I have a Riptide or whatever. But both Inordinate Rage and Spell Shield are going to be very low priorities on the hierarchy of all the instants and sorceries that exist that I could be playing in this color combination. Do I think Relic Amulet and Rockslide Sorcerer can be in the same deck is the next question, which of course was asked before I gave the full answer to the previous question. So obviously the answer is yes. Those cards are great in the same deck. When you have one, it's going to point you in, like, slightly different directions depending on which one it is. But it is, I mean, these are uncommons that not a lot of people at the table want, even though they're really strong. And it is often the case that you will have both of them, and that's fine. The other one, like, whichever one you get early, or, you know, you choose a direction for either one of them, or kind of somewhere in the middle, and both are good cards, but one of them isn't fully optimized or something. But yeah, I'm certainly going to be happy to have multiple Wizard and Spells Matters cards in my deck, regardless of how aggressive or controlling I am once I'm on, you know, trying to prioritize Wizards and Spells. Next question, how do you end up drafting blue-red? Do you fall into it, or are there any uncommons and rares that drive you that way? So this is something that I do in general try to prioritize talking about how I end up in the archetype that I'm talking about each week, and I did kind of skip over that for blue-red this week. Partially, honestly, because blue-red isn't a deck that I super look to draft. The, like, tension, while it can be navigated, I do think that it's a little bit awkward, and mostly I like the blue cards more than the red cards, and I think that the blue cards play better with green cards than they play with red cards, and I think I think that each of the other colors supports the blue defensive cards better than red does, because red is kind of the color that's most focused on aggressive cards in terms of, like, where its strengths are. So many of its top cards are aggressive. The cards that put me into blue most often make me want to avoid red. But as for whether there are cards that, you know, make me try to end up in this spot, like Relic Amulet, obviously, like the Relic Amulet, Rockslide Sorcerer type cards are the cards that are supposed to do that. My preference for the other blue decks over blue-red is strong enough that I will often try to be just like heavy blue splash something other than red and still use Relic Amulet, but I don't think that that's anything like a way that you have to do it, and it's fine to look to be blue-red when you start with a Relic Amulet. But yeah, like for the most part, I'm basically like taking one of these heavy blue control cards and drafting like blue, and then maybe red's open and it's what I happen to play as my support, or I'm taking one of these like heavy red aggro cards and drafting heavy red and then falling into whatever color's open, and then I can fall into blue-red. So I personally am very rarely looking to draft blue-red, and it's just I end up there because I'm specifically like monocolor for a while, and then the other one, like the other half of the pair, is what's open. The next question is, how do I like Zulaport Duelist in the context of blue-red? And I touched on this a little bit. I talked about my mono-red deck that was splashing 2 Zulaport Duelists. I splashed those 2 Zulaport Duelists over like good white rares. So I certainly think the ceiling on Duelist is really, really, really high in like a Grotag Bugcatcher deck. Basically, I think that it's really, really good when you are basically any flavor of like aggro, especially red-based aggro. Like if you have Bugcatcher, Ardent Electromancer type stuff going on, if you're, and like synchronized spellcraft, like it's a good way to get a party type that you might be lacking, especially in the like base red kind of situation. But if I'm like a wizard control deck that's looking to use removal on all their creatures, and I have a bunch of like random 2/1s and 2/3s, or 3/2s rather, that I don't particularly care about saving in combat anyway, I'm just as happy to just trade them off with my opponent's creatures, then Zulaport Duelist is a really bad fit, and I would look to avoid it. So when I'm in kind of this like rock slide sorcerer kind of space, where I'm sort of potentially mid-range, not necessarily like red aggro, and not necessarily like hard inevitability. I guess Thundering Spark Mage is an even better example, where it's like flexible but it does want party. Thundering Spark Mage, I'm gonna consider a Zulaport Duelist, whereas like Rockslide Sorcerer, I'm gonna be a little skeptical of the Zulaport Duelist. And Relic Amulet, I'm gonna be not very interested in Zulaport Duelist. So yeah, not a single answer. It can range in quality really, really highly in within blue-red. Next question is, how do you view Bubble Snare relative to Into the Royal? If I already have one Into the Royal but no other removal, would I take a second Into the Royal or first Snare? So in the context of blue-red, Into the Royal is far superior to Bubble Snare, because it's going to trigger all of my Spells Matter stuff, and it's going to like draw another card so I can get more triggers, and I get to do Tizim Royal Mage, buy back stuff with it. And I'm basically like, if I have any kind of like wizard / instant sorcery matters type payoffs, I'm gonna take my fourth Into the Royal over my first Bubble Snare. Even if I don't have any other removal, like if I don't have Royal Eruptions or whatever, I'd rather just figure it out, bounce their stuff, attack in the air or whatever. Yeah, there are some like blue-green spots where I might prefer Bubble Snare to Into the Royal, but for the most part, that comparison in particular is going to lean pretty heavily toward Into the Royal. If I'm not at all Spells Matters somehow, like if I'm Roost of Drakes, so even if I'm like Lol Mage's Domination, now I'm Spells Matters because now I'm looking for Tizim Royal Mage, and now Into the Royal is great. But if I'm like exactly Roost of Drakes, maybe I could be in a spot where a Bubble Snare is more appealing than Into the Royal, but only if it's late in the draft, because if I'm like blue-red and it's not late, I'm expecting to find things that make me really wish I had the Into the Royal. Bubble Snare is a card that I should talk about some, though. I do think that it's a really strong card, basically regardless. But obviously, like, if you're a Roost of Drakes deck, or if you're any of the blue control decks, or just if you have like multiple field researches, it's so much stronger than like if you are like Umara Mystic aggro and you want your non-creature spells to trigger all of your things that are looking for it. So similar in structure, but not necessarily in magnitude to Zulaport Duelist. Its desirability can change substantially, though it's generally a stronger card than Duelist, though not necessarily a stronger card than Duelist in a really, really, really aggressive party deck. Definitely one where you're gonna like. You want it when you're trying to play a long game, but you want to be careful about it when you are really looking for instants and sorceries, and especially when you're really looking for instants and sorceries, but also looking for creatures. So like the Umara Mystic tempo type decks, those are the ones where you need to be a little careful about Bubble Snare, just because your density of like all non-Bubble Snare stuff matters, and it's going to like make something that's going on worse. Although, like, if you have Umara Mystic, that means you're, like, attacking in the air and your opponent's maybe attacking on the ground, and getting, like, the 1 mana, like, tempo removal spell play is, like, pretty important. So it's not like I'm going to not play a Bubble Snare, probably, so much as, like, I might, prioritize, like, an instant over it. Maybe I would take a Chilling Trap over a Bubble Snare if I didn't think I could table the Chilling Trap and I had a good number of wizards, for example. Next question is, how do I identify blue being open with it being such a deep color in the format? I think I basically, like, because it's so deep, if I have good blue cards and there are still blue cards in the pack, like, it needs to be open relative to blue. And if I can get enough cards to make a deck, I'll call it open. If the person passing to me also happened to be blue, shrugs. I don't necessarily worry about whether blue's open. Like, if I have a reason to be blue, I'll just fight for it and it'll work out. And then if it's not as open as I thought, I just take more red cards. Part of the strength of like this idea where you kind of stick monocolor and then make sure that you fall into the most open second color is that if the color that you started with ends up being overdrafted and just runs out and you don't see it in the rest of the draft, at least now you know that your second color is theoretically one that's going to stay open, and you just end up shifting more and more heavily into this second color that you might have been picking, like backdooring into as a splash, but then ended up being your primary color because you were getting cut on the color you started on, and that's fine. You'll be able to like pivot pretty safely in that kind of spot. Can I talk about Bugcatcher versus Squid is the next question. Yeah, Bugcatcher is the card with the higher ceiling. Bugcatcher is like amazing when you are party aggro, but it also has a much lower floor. Squid is never really bad. Like even if I am party aggro, the 3/2 attacking early, like you tend not to miss like land drops for a little while, and your opponent can't really like ignore the 3/2. So like I'm basically okay playing Squid in whatever. Though I could certainly. If my Bugcatcher deck is going well, a Squid won't make my deck. But if a Squid does have to make my deck, I'm not going to be sad about it. Whereas if I'm playing like a hard control deck, base blue, and I have to play a Bugcatcher, I am going to be sad about that. Bugcatcher is a really horrible defensive card, and even though it's like strong enough that I can probably trade off with it before my opponent like realizes how bad it is in my deck or whatever, it's like going to be pretty horrible if I draw it late, and I don't care about what it's doing for me. Like even if I get in a bunch of early damage, I'm not going to, like if the rest of my deck isn't trying to close out the game with that, I'm unlikely to win that way, and then I won't end up winning until I could have won anyway, and it didn't accomplish anything. The basic answer on the comparison between the two cards is that they just go in really different decks, and I know very, very early in a draft which one I'm looking to take over the other one. And there's not a lot of confusion between the two. So I actually think that like if you have a basic idea, that's like a pick where you don't need very precise knowledge to take the right card most of the time. If you're trying to attack, take the Bugcatcher. If you're not trying to attack, take the Squid. And the time when you're not trying to attack is when you believe that your deck has inevitability against most people. Next question is, do Royal Eruptions being open push me in any particular direction for the build? Royal eruptions being open. I assume you just mean like I have picked a royal eruption or two. It's not like, oh, no one at this table is drafting royal eruptions. Royal Eruption obviously is pretty similar to Thundering Rebuke. It's just like a flexible great card, really good in aggro, especially because it can like go to your opponent's face, but also very good in control because it's cheap removal that buys you time to do your inevitability stuff, triggers your kicker matters things and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, into the Royal Eruption is just a card that you're going to take early if you're blue-red, and it's going to make whatever deck you have better, and it's not really going to inform any decisions about other cards you should take based on the fact that you have it outside of, like, it's a good spell for your, like, Royal Mages, but it's the kind of thing where it's like a support good spell rather than like something like Lil Mage's Domination or the blue kicker rare, the cycle of 3 cards. I don't know. 4 mana, do one of 3 things. Kicker, do them all. That rare is a card that's going to make you like really, really highly prioritize Tizzy Royal Mage as like a strategy, whereas Royal Eruption is just going to support that's what you're trying to do. Inscription is the cycle there, the blue Inscription. All right, now we have another great question. How do I view Molten Blast in blue-red? A sideboard card for artifact hate or main deckable? Fun fact, I've maybe put that card in my main deck once lifetime. I don't like spending 3 mana on that effect. Sideboard card for artifact hate's kind of generous. I could imagine a world where I sideboarded in, theoretically, I suppose. But that's the kind of card that I just believe I can do better. And I'm not the sort of person who's so desperate for removal as a concept that I'm going to ever look to select that card or put it into my deck or anything. That's the 3 mana do 2 damage to, I think, a creature, not a player. Maybe it can hit players for 2, but I don't think so. Or kill an artifact. Like I said, I've never played it though, so I could be wrong about what it does. But yeah, not a priority for me. And that covers the current available questions that have been asked. If anyone has any further follow-up questions, I am still here and I'm happy to take more. And if not, sure. Another quick similar question: is Sizzling Barrage playable when you have lots of Bug Catcher? Well, I've never been in a spot where I have so many Bug Catchers that I would want Sizzling Barrage, while red is so cut that I might consider playing Sizzling Barrage. In theory, it does make sense that if I have a bunch of Bug Catchers, Sizzling Barrage would be a good card. In practice, it still seems relatively unlikely that I got all these Bug Catchers and Sizzling Barrage is the best I can do. But yes, I could certainly see a world where that's the thing that happens if you have 3+ Bug Catchers, that Sizzling Barrage is appealing to play. I've never put it in a deck, I've never cast it, but I obviously Bug Catcher is the card that it plays best with, and that could be a thing. Next question is, how highly does field research slide into pick order early? Is this a priority like it is in blue-green? Should I take it over Bubble Snare, for instance? And the answer to that is that when I don't know what I'm drafting, field research is roughly my favorite common in the set. So early on, I'm certainly going to slot field research very, very, very high into my pick order. This question was asked by someone who mentioned they were not here at the beginning of this, so missing presumably the context that when I'm drafting blue-red, I'm looking to most likely start with one or more strong uncommons that are going to offer a lot of direction, and so I will very quickly know if I'm in a field research kind of archetype or not a field research kind of archetype. If I'm starting with Shatterskull Minotaur or some other really aggressive red cards, then field research immediately plummets in my pick order. But if I'm blue control or just drafting good cards, then field research is always going to be right at the top of my pick order. I'm going to be very loath to take another card over it. certainly it won't be uncommon for me to be in a spot where I'm taking Royal Eruption over field research, but for the most part, like, yeah, I love field research. I'm going to take field research highly, unless I know that I'm specifically like a red deck that's splashing blue cards, and in that kind of deck, I'm looking to avoid playing field research. That is going to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always, if you've enjoyed this content, you are encouraged to follow my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SamuelHBlack. Subscribe to whatever feed you're watching this on. It could be YouTube, that could be a podcast app, or whatever. And if you're really into it and looking for additional content, or just looking to offer further support, please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/draftingarchetypes. Getting toward the end of Zendikar, really excited to get into Kaldheim, where I can, offer hopefully a lot of information to people who are really looking for it, with some cards and mechanics and everything that are totally new and fresh. But I appreciate everyone who I know that we're very late into Zendikar now, and I assume that most of you are here just to kind of use a format that you maybe already know as a way to kind of internalize some more fundamental type principles, and certainly my goal is to facilitate that kind of learning through these. So appreciate everyone dedication to just like learning fundamentals and sticking with this while it's kind of an old format. Anyway, that is going to wrap up the podcast.